This week on the RYA 150 podcast, we have a special interview with the greatest Olympic sailor of all time, Sir Ben Ainslie. 5 Olympics, 4 golds, 1 silver, from Atlanta 96 to London 2012 and beyond. Ben reflects on the moments, the pressure and the legacy that shaped his career and the future of sailing. We also look ahead at how technology, foiling and sail GP are shaping the future of the sport and the advice Ben would give to the next generation chasing Olympic dreams. This is the story of grit, rivalry and the relentless pursuit of excellence by the man who shaped an era.
So Ben Ainslie, thank you so much for joining us today at Seaview Yacht Club. It's great to have you here. We're going to go back in time a little bit today to reflect on your extraordinary career in Olympic sailing and touch on some of the evolutions to Olympic sailing since you stepped away from that side of the sport after London 2012. 5 Olympics, 4 gold medals, 1 silver, the world's most successful Olympic sailor, a CV so full of achievement it's quite hard to know where to begin. But what's your feeling now when you look back on your Olympic era?
Well, it's always a danger when you look back on things like that, and quite a long time ago now, with rose-tinted spectacles, as they say. But no, I mean, it genuinely was, some of the most amazing experiences of my life, and certainly the people that I got to work with, be they coaches or peers, and the team at the RYA, just a fantastic opportunity, and really privileged to have been a part of that sort of era of Olympic sailors coming through on the back of, Jim Saltonstall, who was, for most of us, he was our coach as we were coming through the youth squad, and then into the Olympic squads with the likes of John Derbyshire and Rod Carr, David Howlett, and then Sparky managing the team. So it was, just a great group of people, and we achieved some amazing things together.
Is there one moment, a race or a finish, or maybe there's something completely random off the water that comes to your mind first when you think about your Olympic sailing days?
Well, it's really, I think the outstanding event for my generation of sailors, I guess, was London 2012, and just what an incredible opportunity to race or be involved with a home Olympics. For whether you were competing or not, just to be around those games and the buzz and the excitement and all of the spectators that could get on the nose down on the edge of Weymouth and Portland to view the racing. It was just a once in a lifetime opportunity.
We'll dig into that a little bit more later on. But fantastic memories. 5 Olympic Games, a huge stretch of time to try and stay on top. So from a fresh-faced 19-year-old in Atlanta to a national icon really in London. How did you grow and evolve as a sailor and as a person through that time?
Yeah, it's crazy really. When I look back to it, I was only 19 the first Olympics I went to, and I was definitely a wide-eyed teenager at that point, and really didn't quite understand what I was getting myself into, if I'm honest. And thankfully I had just one of those events where I started off on the back foot, didn't start off that well, but then got into my rhythm, had a really good string of results, and had a shot at the gold medal going into the final day. And it, in many ways was sounds stupid now, but was disappointed, having a chance to win a gold medal and not quite making it. I wasn't sure if I would get that opportunity again. So mixed emotions, but I learned so much from that experience, and really helped me moving forward to the rest of my career.
It's well known that Atlanta 96 was a tough games overall for Team GB, who finished 36th in the medal table. Sailing was a rare bright spot in that, with your silver and the 470 silver for John Merrick's and Ian Walker. But that moment was really a game changer for British sport, with the introduction of national lottery funding right off the back of that disappointment. What impact did that have on the RYA and the British sailing team's approach?
Yeah, the lottery funding was massive, and it was John Major. Really, you have to give credit to his government for implementing that through the lottery and the good causes, and the Olympic sport being one of those. And straight away, you saw the difference in the obviously the level of funding going into the national governing bodies, and then directing that into Olympic sport, and just the access to coaching, the support network, the facilities, the support in trying to access the best equipment. It was, a real game changer, and we saw that straight away in the results across the board, not just in sailing. We had an amazing event in Sydney, one of our best ever medal hauls, but we saw that across the board in British sport and British Olympic team. So it really was, like I say, it was a game changer, and I think it set the scene now for such a great, recent history of British Olympic sport being right at the very top of the medal table.
I was just going to ask if there's some sort of tangible examples from a sailing team point of view you can think of where that funding was directed that made an impact sort of straight away. Was it your ability to go full time? Was it full time coaching? What sort of things did you see between Atlanta and Sydney that made that difference?
I think it was across the board really. It wasn't just one specific thing, but I can think of obvious examples. When I first got into Olympic sailing, most people were sleeping in the backs of their cars or in a tent, in the pouring rain somewhere in Europe trying to compete. So to be able to have some decent accommodation, make sure that the food and nutrition was well looked after, access the best coaching, the best physiology, sports science, and of course coming down to just the core elements of the sailing and the coaches that we're able to access from a sailing perspective, and then equipment. Some of the equipment in some of the classes was an important aspect to performance, so being able to develop the equipment was a big part of it. So it really, I wouldn't pinpoint one specific area, but across the board it just made a massive difference.
Great. You touched on earlier, but from Sydney onwards, the British sailing team entered a sort of golden era, really, off the back of that investment. And you were right in the thick of it, alongside the likes of Ian, Percy, Shirley Robertson, Sarah Ayton, Sarah Webb, Paul Goodison, Andrew Simpson. What was it like to be part of that generation?
Yeah, like I said, I'm just really fortunate to be, part of just a wonderful group of people and athletes and sailors and support staff. And certainly, the more I've gone through my career and looked back, and quite often you take for granted the support that you've had, and you think back, well, we achieved a huge amount as a group, and we couldn't have done it as individuals. It was collectively the whole squad that really fed off each other, and you can see that success build success, and people have, being part of that team, feeding confidence, feeding off that group, which was just great to see and great to be a part of.
Any behind the scenes stories you can share from that time?
Plenty of behind the scenes stories, Lindsay. Some of which I think we'll have to agree that best kept out of the public arena. But no, we had a lot of fun. We had a lot of fun. We worked really, really hard, and we achieved a lot. But we also enjoyed our successes, and I think that's the way it should be. It was just a great time.
Fantastic. 5 Olympic campaigns, and that's an incredible amount of physical and mental grind. What was your why across all of those years, and how, and did that change from Atlanta through to London?
That's a good question. I mean, I just as a kid, I loved sailing, loved the sport, and then sort of followed. First Olympics I followed was '92 Olympics, and we had some sailing success there, and really then I was fortunate the boat that I was sailing as a youngster, the laser class, became an Olympic class for the '96 Olympics. So then I could see a pathway to perhaps having a crack at the Olympic Games, and I narrowly got selection for those '96 Games, and I was 18 years old, so I had to sort of make some quite tricky early career decisions, if you like. And so that kind of set me on the way, and then obviously missed out on the gold medal in '96. So then, of course, the obvious thing is we've got to try and go one better. 2000, just about managed to do that against a great rival of mine, Robert Scheidt from Brazil, and then I was on a roll really, and just fortunate to have some great opportunities to get involved with the professional side of the sport, with the America's Cup and some other types of sailing, and so. I didn't really set out with this, idea that I could race at multiple Olympics. Just getting to one Olympics was a start, and then, it just progressed. And then as we talked about earlier, ended up in London 2012, which was just a wonderful opportunity to sort of bow out at a home games. And I think the support, like I said before, the support that my generation of sailors had to come through to access lottery funding, to then get the support through the RYA and the support staff and the coaching really was, well, you said it, was really sort of a golden generation and a golden opportunity.
I was going to ask if that Elvstrom record at any point featured in your mind that you were going to go for that, the gold medal.
Well, it clearly came up a lot in the build up to London 2012, and it wasn't, if I'm really honest, I said at the time, when you're in that situation, you can't really afford to think about things like that. So you're just sort of thinking at the goal, the job at hand, and just concentrate on trying to achieve that. It's had a few close shaves in my Olympic career. That was about as close as it could ever get, and it didn't until I sort of crossed the finish line and realised. Then it suddenly, dawned on me what I'd achieved, and as a kid growing up, a couple of heroes in sailing. One was Russell Coutts, and the other was Paul Elvstrom. So to be up there and with an Olympic career alongside someone like that was a really proud moment.
We're going to dig into London 2012 just a tiny bit more. So competing at home games is a huge thing for any Olympic athlete. You kicked off the torch relay back home in Cornwall. You were one of the faces of the games for Team GB, and everyone expected you to deliver gold. How did you deal with that kind of pressure? And did it somehow feel different to you because it was home games?
Well, I guess the real answer is I probably didn't deal with it that well, because I didn't actually sail. I mean, I ended up managing to get across the line in the end, but it wasn't my best event by any means, and I was struggling a bit physically. The Finn class of boat that I was racing, it was the men's heavyweight division, so therefore, obviously you needed to be quite big to be competitive in the boat, and naturally it wasn't really my size, so I struggled keeping the weight on, and that put a lot of pressure on my body, and so I was struggling with injury and wasn't at full fitness, and definitely was on the back foot. So I think that was a big challenge, and the fact that it was a home Olympics really gave me the motivation and the determination to come through and get there in the end. I think if it hadn't have been for that, then there's a good chance I might not have been able to get it across the line.
Crossing that finish line off the nose, knowing you'd done it on home waters, and it was going to be your final Olympic race. What went through your head in that moment? Do you remember?
Oh, it's just pure relief at those moments, because clearly everyone puts so much effort into Olympic campaigns. It really is just full on for years and years and years, and multiple Olympic cycles. And I kind of knew that was going to be the end of my Olympic career, most likely. And so the sort of relief on reaching that goal, if you like, to get the gold medal on home waters. Just massive relief, and and then you sort of think about all the people who've helped you along the way, and a lot of those people were there watching the race, had the opportunity to watch the race on that spectator ground in Weymouth and Portland. So being able to share that moment with them was really special.
Fantastic. After years at the top of elite sport, what do you think you learned about yourself that you never expected? And if you could go back now, what's one thing you'd tell young Ben starting out?
Well, there are all the sort of obvious cliches about, you can never stop learning and all these sorts of things. I think certainly relationships, those key relationships, be they with coaches or your peers, really, really important. For me, as a single-handed sailor on the back of London 2012 and then branching out into the team side of sailing was a big learning curve in terms of building relationships and in communication skills in particular. When you start racing and getting into high pressure environments. So that was another stage in my career. So I think the great thing about sailing is there are just so many opportunities. There's so many different types of boat, class of boat, types of racing. So to go from Olympic sailing into more of an America's Cup focused, the team side of the sport, the technical side of the sport, then into foiling boats with that transition. Yeah, I just, again, really privileged to have sort of been in that era of sailors that went from, the old timers, if you like, the displacement boats, certainly displacement keel boats that we used to race in America's Cup, into the foiling generation of boats. It's been quite some transformation for the sport.
It's a perfect segue into my next section, which is all about that, actually. Sailing's gone through this huge leap, foiling boats, shorter, faster races, more spectacle. What's your sort of take on how that's shaped Olympic sailing?
Well, it's been transformative, really, hasn't it, for the sport to come into the foiling classes, both in dinghies and in bigger boats like we've seen in the America's Cup, ocean racing as well. I think it's clearly the right direction. I mean, the amount of fun that you can be derived from these foiling boats, not only for the sailors, but I think for the spectators as well. We look at America's Cup and SailGP in particular, and the effort that's gone into the broadcasting of those events, I think has really taken the sport to new levels and a new fan base.
What does the Olympics and Olympic sailing need to do to remain relevant and exciting to future generations?
Yeah, I think clearly it's got to be at the cutting edge of the technology in the sport, and that is in foiling classes, and again how that can be presented better so the racing's more visually impactful for the spectators. So yeah, it's both more exciting for the athletes and more compelling for the spectators, and clearly the foiling classes are the way forward. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how they develop. I know there's a lot of people looking at how that can be improved, which classes should be perhaps moved aside for some faster, more dynamic boats. We'll see how that develops. But I think again, sailing has this great opportunity because it's a sport that really is going up against Mother Nature, and the technology now in these boats is really phenomenal. And I think exciting especially for the younger audiences, which is what we need to see.
Fantastic. We'll come on to a little bit more about tech in a moment as well. But you've bridged two worlds now, Olympic sailing and the high-tech, high-speed world of SailGP and America's Cup. What lessons from your Olympic campaigning have you taken into that next chapter?
Well, I think it doesn't matter if you're sailing on your own or you're sailing with a team or you're sailing in a displacement boat or a 75-foot foiling monohull. It really comes down to the fundamentals of the sport. You've still got to get a good start. You've still got to read the wind shifts and obviously be at one with the boat and understand the setup of the boat to maximise performance. And then, of course, it's all about teamwork, particularly in America's Cup and SailGP and races like that. These boats are so dynamic. Every manoeuvre that you make, the choreography has got to be absolutely spot on, and you can see that when you're watching those races that the top teams are just absolutely bang on perfect. And so that's really requires a lot of focus, really good coaching support and backup for the sailing team, and that's what's been really interesting in the sort of second half of my career is how that coaching support has developed with the technology that we now have at hand and the data that we can access, both the sailors and the coaches can access to really understand where the performance is coming from in the boat.
SailGP and the AC, all about the tech, the design, the innovation. You see in sports like Formula One that sort of trickle-down effect into everyday cars. What impact do you sort of see SailGP and the AC having on recreational sailing sort of down the line? What's that trickle-down look like?
It's a good question. I'm not sure I want to see too many cruising boats foiling around with a wing sail, but you never know. They might get away with it for a certain amount of time. But yeah, no, inevitably that there is. You're absolutely right. The technology is there, and whether that's in reducing costs or the efficiency of the boats and the equipment, there inevitably will be many trickle down effects. I think probably the data that we can now access in any types of sailing, be that cruising or racing, and the systems that we use to control and operate these high performance boats definitely will trickle down to the mainstream sailing and make any kind of boat easier to sail and more efficient and probably more fun.
I put this one in quite late. It's fairly topical because I did read an interview that you did the other day about this. But I suppose my question is how can Olympic sailing, SailGP and the America's Cup coexist in terms of creating opportunities and pathways for sailors, men and women, and developing talent, because there's a lot of calendar congestion coming up now, and you see Olympic sailors stepping into both of those worlds. They're both getting more busy, more demands on their time. How do you think we can coexist in those three?
Yeah, we've seen a massive step forwards in female participation, be that in equality in Olympic classes, and then more recently with the SailGP female athlete representation on the boats, and then the America's Cup with the first ever female America's Cup last year in Barcelona. So that is a great step forwards, and certainly not a moment too soon. In terms of the pathway for young sailors coming through, we set up our Athena Pathway program, which is really trying to identify the young talent coming through and how do they make that jump from Olympic sailing into SailGP or America's Cup or other professional areas of the sport. America's Cup and SailGP have a great opportunity, I think, to really showcase the very best of professional high performance sailing. And I think they very much can complement each other. But the key is to make sure that they do that. They're not trying to fight against each other for airspace in terms of scheduling. So that's really what as a team we operate in both SailGP and the America's Cup. So we're really keen to support both events to make sure that we get that scheduling, we get that support, and we really make the biggest impact for the sport of sailing. That's what's most important.
Fantastic. Couple more then. So for young sailors getting into the sport, from an RYA point of view, how would you say the RYA and the British Sailing Pathways help prepare those young sailors for a life in sailing, whether that's competitively or just the pure love of it?
I think the RYA as a national governing body for sailing have done a phenomenal job over many, many years. I mean, so I've been fortunate to have been involved now for 30 odd years with the RYA, and as I talked about as a youngster coming through with the likes of Jim Saltonstall, and then through the Olympic programs, and then still, whether it's SailGP or America's Cup, we're still representing Britain, and a lot of the key talent is coming through the RYA, be that through the youth squads or Olympic squads. And so I think the opportunities now with the transformation of the sport becoming that much more exciting, we're seeing younger and younger audiences getting behind the sport. So it's really about trying to make sure from the grassroots up that most importantly the kids are having fun, and then the kids that really want to take it to the next level, they have that opportunity, whether it's going through the Olympic classes or directly into the professional side of the sport, and how we can help as well with the Athena Pathway program and other programs like that to give as many youngsters the opportunity to get out and race. But also it might not necessarily be racing, it might be coming in and getting involved with the professional, the management side of it, or the technical side, or shore operations, boat building. There are so many avenues there for a talented, skilled young person that loves sailing to really forge a career in the sport.
Beyond the medals, beyond the podium, what's the sport of sailing given you, and what's stayed with you about sailing from your lifetime on the water?
Well, yeah, it has really been my life. I mean, I've been hugely fortunate to have had the opportunities that I have had, and people that have supported me along the way, starting from my parents, and then all of the other people, coaches, support, sponsors, you name it. It takes a huge team effort, and so I just I still think it's the most wonderful sport. I get just as much enjoyment going out sailing in a Seaview One design dinghy that they have here on the Isle of Wight as I do going out racing on an AC75. It's just the being at one with Mother Nature and being out. There's something. I'm going to sound a bit romantic here, but there's just something that's so special about being out on the water and feeling the waves and the wind. And yeah, I think those of us that love the sport will be able to understand that. And it's a very, very special opportunity to be out there doing what you love.
Amazing. Ben, thank you so much. It's been amazing to hear your reflections, to catch up with you today, especially with the evolution of the sport and how that's changing. Thank you for everything you've done so far to put British sailing on the map, and we're looking forward to that continuing long into the future. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you for your
Lindsay.
time.
Thank you for listening, and join me next week where we talk about one of the darkest chapters in sailing history, the 1979 Fastnet race, the storm that changed sailing.